Well, good evening and welcome to the Gold Goats and Guns Hour here on YouTube. My name is Tom Luongo. It is Tuesday, March 29th, 2022, and we have a lot to talk about. So before I get completely started, to remind everybody, I'm in the process of setting up this evening's live stream. It's already done. It's cool. Just for everybody's edification, we will be moving over to Odyssey in about 15 minutes or so. I'm going to do 15 minutes here on YouTube, and then we'll move over to Odyssey. And there's the link that's in the chat as of right now for where we're going in about 15 minutes. So what are we going to talk about tonight? Well, I want to start out with, there's many things we're going to talk about when we get over to Odyssey. What we're going to talk about right now is the situation in the war in Ukraine. And the way this is laying out is that it's very clear at this point that the ground war in Ukraine has hit a kind of stasis point, and which is almost exactly what I would have expected to happen. I think we even talked about this last week. So we've reached that point now, and now we've moved into the next phase of things. And on Friday, the Russians came out and pegged the ruble to gold, and by extension, then, of course, pegged their own oil exports for gold. And from everything that I have said previously, and all the blog posts that I've put out over the last couple of weeks, and private posts from my patrons and everybody else, that we will move into the next phase of this after this initial foray by the Russians. Now, before I go any farther, I can see the comments in the chats. I will be on with Halsey at 10:30 on his channel. I will have a link up on Twitter in a little bit, but as of right now, we canceled last night's show. We're going to be doing, and we'll be doing it tonight after this one. So I will be cutting off my stream on Odyssey right around 10:15, 10:20 or so I can get another cup of coffee, and then we can do the thing. So there we go. All right. So now, back to the show at hand. We've now reached that point where there's nothing more for the Russians to really gain on the ground other than the continued clearing out of the Azov battalion in various areas around the south of Ukraine. They've taken Mariupol. They've encircled Mykolaiv. They've taken Kherson, and now they're offering to back off in Kiev and Chernihiv in the north. Now, there are many different interpretations of the Russians' performance on the ground, and my partner Dexter White and I have gone back and forth on this ad nauseum. And I think he and I are going to record a podcast in the morning, and we'll talk about a little bit more of this, and I'll try and get that out tomorrow afternoon before I take the evening off. If not, it'll be out Thursday sometime. And we're going to discuss, we both have a different view of the Russians' operational success in Ukraine. And I'm not going to fanboy this stuff out, and anybody who wants to fanboy this out can, and wants to take any criticism I may have of the Russians' performance on the ground in Ukraine. You can get angry with me for not wanting to be a fanboy about it all you want. Doesn't matter. I think there have been tremendous gains, and I think there have been some operational mishaps. And not taking Kiev was definitely one of them. And that has forced the current situation. And it's forced a situation at this point that has emboldened the neocons within the State Department and the National Security Council, namely Anthony Blinken, Jake Sullivan, Victoria Nuland, and others, to think that a further escalation of this conflict is the right next stage for the United States. And Joe Biden was sent over to Poland and to NATO in order to drum up support and to lay the groundwork for the next stage of how they're going to lie us into war in Ukraine. Make no mistake, they absolutely, and I've said this for months, I've said this for 6 months now, that Davos absolutely wants the United States involved in Ukraine in almost, if not officially, unofficially. They want this to happen because they know that by doing this, they will delegitimize the United States and the world states. The United States will, and the neocons will take measures which will delegitimize the United States in the long run. It will put further pressure on the budget. It will give Biden the reason, the impetus and justification for expanding the military budget, which they did. Biden's military budget for next year, $813 billion, over $770 last year and $729 the year before that. So defense spending in the United States through the fucking roof. We've increased spending on defense in the last 2 years more than the entire Russian military budget. I'll say that again. We have increased spending in the last 2 years alone by more money than the Russians spend annually on defense. Okay? Just to put it in perspective. Okay? Now, we can normalize that for purchasing power parity and how far those dollars actually go within the Department of Defense, yada yada yada. We can do this all day long. And we can argue whether those numbers are, how much of those numbers are real and how much they aren't. Fine. But they absolutely want to see the United States in Ukraine. Now, at the same time, they also don't want a wider war in the European continent, because that would invalidate the whole raison d'etre for the EU in the first place. Point I've made many times. The whole point of selling the European Union to Europeans, which is the European Union will be the mechanism by which no more internecine wars will be fought on the European continent. Now, that's obviously failed, as long as they consider Ukraine part of Europe. As long as it doesn't break containment, fine. The issue is whether or not it's going to break containment or not. The Poles are doing their job, happily going along with all manner of aggressive rhetoric, saying they're going to take back Kaliningrad, they're going to do this, they're going to do that. And, if criticisms of the Russian ground war in Ukraine are valid, then it's very possible that the Poles may have the armor, along with full NATO support, to actually achieve that if they wanted to. Now, would that lead Putin to then going nuclear? Absolutely. The very least, we'll see hypersonic missiles fly out of Russia well across the borders of Ukraine into Europe itself, without a doubt. So is this a dangerous situation? It absolutely is. The problem from the beginning here is that without a lightning strike and a decapitation strike against Kiev, the way Putin originally envisioned it, the way it originally was drawn up on the whiteboard, leads to the eventual conclusion that the neocons in the State Department and the National Security Council will think they have an opportunity to counterstrike in a way that is dangerous. They'll think they have a better opportunity than they actually have. And this is the crux of the matter at this point. It's very clear that Biden was sent out to up the war rhetoric, for Blinken to do the exact same thing. The talking points that I saw today published on RT that came out of the peace negotiations in Istanbul were horseshit. They were typical Obama doublespeak. Well, we'll give you this, but we want to carve this out, which will invalidate what we're giving you. It's a whole series of 6 points, and every fucking one of them, I could go through the whole thing. Every fucking one of them was this. It was, we'll give you what you want, but we're going to carve this out, which will invalidate what we gave you. So we'll put a moratorium on, NATO membership, but we want to still be able to allow Ukraine into the EU. Well, if Ukraine goes into the EU, then it might as well go into fucking NATO. Like, it's fucking horse shit. They're effectively one and the same. So it doesn't matter. Because ultimately, the U.S. is angling to build up troops in Poland and then eventually move into Ukraine. And between now and whenever they're ready for that, there's going to be a false flag incident in order to justify to the American people why we're moving troops into Ukraine. Just that simple. Herpegus Mick Durpington says, hey, Putin has less than a month to finish this before U.S. boots are on the ground. Every service member I've talked to says the same thing. They're going to be deployed before May. I don't doubt that. I don't doubt that at all. That's exactly what I would expect out of all of this, right? That ultimately, this is where this whole thing is headed. It's all, nothing more. All of these peace talks and everything else are designed to do two things. One, waste everybody's fucking time while more troops and material are moved into Poland. And two, to keep the financial markets from collapsing because, A, they can write headlines saying, oh, there were peace talks. Oh, there was movement. And the Russians coming out this morning and saying, look, we're willing to back off in Kiev and Chernihiv. We've achieved almost all of our operational goals in the south, which is what we wanted. We told you we weren't trying to take over the entire country. We're as good as our word. The neocons will always interpret that as a sign of weakness. Always. Does not matter if it's real or not. That's the way they will interpret this. They will think we're winning. We can bleed Russia white. If they believe their own press clippings and they believe all their own propaganda that the Russians don't have the amount of armor or the amount of fifth generation fighters or any of the things that they say they have, if they don't believe they actually have those weapons because the sanctions have been so effective at keeping them from being able to build the guns and the optics and the EW systems and the engines necessary to build the tanks and the planes and whatnot. That would be truly scary in a war against NATO. Then they may have a point. And it's something we have to bracket for. I'm dead serious. I'm not saying that I believe that, but I have to bracket for that. It's very important that we consider all sides of this. It's very important that we consider that maybe Scott Ritter is overselling some of this stuff. That maybe Andrei Martyanov is overselling some of this stuff. We have to believe that. We have to at least bracket for that. Because to do otherwise is to invite fucking disaster. I'm not saying that the Russians are going to lose. I'm not saying I'm not saying that they're not capable on the ground. I'm not saying that their men aren't capable or that they didn't find out a whole lot of operational inefficiencies within their own military system. They learned a lot in the last month. But I am saying that we should be very, very careful about what it is we think the Russians have and have not achieved in Ukraine so far. Okay. So we're going to be going over to Odyssey in just about a minute or two. I'm going to close off my comments here by saying, look, and here's the link in this is in the chat. Again, we'll be cutting off here in just a minute. Okay. And we're going to talk about more of this and more of what's happening in the financial markets and what I'm seeing and how this all plays out strategically and tactically and what everybody else's potential moves are. But I want you to think in these terms. I want you to consider that this situation right now is very, very delicate. We could be moving into a phase where these crazy fucking racist neocons who hate Russians and hate Chinese to the point where they're willing to risk nuclear fucking war think that they're in a better position than they may actually be in. And the opposite situation, and from the opposite side of this is, are the Russians inviting this kind of weakness in order to ensure that tens of thousands of Americans are killed in Ukraine? And that this thing breaks containment and logistics and NATO logistics and staging areas within Poland get attacked, because that's the only thing that makes any sense. If Putin was I'm going to leave people on YouTube with this thought. If Putin was willing to preempt an attack on the Donbass in February because he knew an attack was coming from the UAF and from the Ukrainians on the Donbass and say he preempted that by 3 days. Say they weren't lying about that. They knew that we were going to attack, that the Ukrainians, with our help, were going to attack on like the 27th or the 28th of February. And they attacked on the 24th in order to preempt that with a move that we weren't expecting. Which is why we lost our fucking minds. Then what makes you think that the Russians wouldn't preempt an attack coming from Poland? This has been my short stream for Tuesday, March 29th, 2022, here on YouTube. I want you to think about this very carefully. We're moving over to Odyssey, where I'm going to chat about some of this in a little bit more detail, and amongst other things, and answer some questions. You're all welcome to join me over there. We have 186 over here on YouTube. That's kind of cool. Well, let's go over to Odyssey, where we'll have 400 people or more, and we can actually let our hair down. Metaphorically speaking, in my case, of course. So you guys be well. You take care. We'll talk soon. Talk on Odyssey in about 5 minutes. Keep your stick on the ice.